Hello, Americans. Retired and standing, we have interbranch names recorded how used as victims and as hyper victims, but as victim predators, hyper predators. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises and with private ones, and with insidiousness to the logic of people A through Z as assigned and applied by breaching a human fact cheating nature breaching method, and or that person is sensed, making proper defenses of the finite and or of uses for evidence what is actually simultaneously recorded. So it is way beyond just the natural demonstrations where we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and exceptions and exception in nature as different eyes, color eyes, where the other species bodies have the shared identity of relativity that demonstrates they have individual, simultaneously group difference, male, female, ages, location, slash S, relativity to positive and negative value nature systems that have one, increasingly conjunctive, hyper-conjunctive to it. Well, I say, well, not boxing. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling shared identity and a function because all the identities share one. That's only part of how it demonstrates this. While it's demonstrating kind of simultaneously, while it's teaching about the exceptions and exception nature. Except for that, now, actually, we have been systems that are leaving out how nature uses exception nature to identity, to additional identities of ways as two distinct identities of value slash value regression. Apart with the three, as the order of the finite, the smallest finite detail, group details, such as that those differences between individual volume science that is simultaneously valued as group difference slash S, and simultaneously as the species volume science, where volume equals value as nature slash nature as value, and nature as value slash value as nature. The other sequence simultaneously, conversely slash hyperconversely. Because not just is it either positive to all parts of itself, and further not as positive as criminal insidiousness nature, relative to Earth's and our special difference now. I self-promote, boxing. The scientists, see the breaching method knew that our founders didn't have free speech. The breaching method measured and maintained effectively the causes for protests against the tea tax with England and treatments of that, leaving out how slavery was entrenched north and south and uses of it that had nothing to do with the known motivations. This is part of the torture method that was already being and is still sustained against Native Americans. Who wants to deny that, for example, has to leave out the significance of how, since before our founders were born, the suburbs were designed tactically denatured, relying upon value nature systems of other places unnaturally. There is a natural function for where and how the species body is supposed to be bound, grouped and individual, even with the same individuals. Even with any group, it could be made up even better. That's just going to show that, not just individually, but grouped ways. See, forgiveness is not to leave out the breaching method. and to not allow told on and used for correlation how there are collusions between everyone. It is easy to discern how only psychopaths in defenses of their opinions and convictions regarding where and how they should stay calm or aggressive per the only allowed herd treatments of black and white, leaving out the increasing relativity, the value of the increasing value, leaving out the increasing value of the increasing relativity of their breaching method that assign those crazy laws, and the value and the meaning of witch trials, regardless who made that up or what extent that was made up, and or by who. Whoa. So, self-value, reception of the sciences, reception of the religions, and defenses of the logic with that, could only have defended themselves by self-value in our faces is communicated for our founders, other than they were asked to communicate through our schools, and the difference of that is measured and maintained by a breaching method that also maintains everyone through other motivations and nature's needs interests, measure and maintain the real cause of negative nature, progressions, acts, and natures, the differences of schools, types of schools, other natures of campus have nothing to do with schools. Other database locations have nothing to do with any of that. Exceptions are made for all these places, and they already were. So learn how that is exploited, ineffectively gotten keeps, criminally foreign influence takes on ancient, modern history, and on the value of what's to come and how to deal with it. You don't leave out how the hibernative system is forbid free speech and everyone's forced to pretend other, as is practicality. If you guys were honest and follow mandated laws, show only fakes have been allowed to speak because of a certain type of child abuse that had you blame other things other than yourselves, even when correctly, for the real reason why and how. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness of people A through Z, and the criminal insidiousness as our country's three branches of government, exception tied to that, in our country's grouped that way. All voicings for humanity. Left out what is hyper-evidentially recorded. Left out how the suburbs were designed to act in nature before cars were invented, before our founders were born. So little kids have means like this to discern identities of the law, identities speaking for human potential, are fake. Now they know that they have kids that are relying upon other needed to be pretended. Oh, it's politics, etc. They have some with overt criminal enterprises and private ones at the same time. Even right on Facebook, even if they're made up and they're undercover police roles of where and how. You know, the military is criminally foreign influence, rolls on and off the corrections offices, tactically delusions wrong, tactically criminally foreign influence, fact-checking nature collusion, colluding, communicating other than they communicate. So don't flip out when they pretend they catch people lying. When they have treatments of, they have self-value uses. They make confessions through the former director of the FBI with people like Kevin Dillon and people tied to him, like Thomas Dillon and Anna Dillon, how she switches and uses the name Annie Dillon. They've been along roads and routes Planting federal evidence is crime. Roles of where and how courts have been used criminally, foreign influence used remotely. Show needs to hide that with other things that come before that. It is relative to as answers, and it is relative to questions. Where and how for so long also as evidence. People can pretend and got away with pretending they think that the problems in New York City, in Hartford, let alone New York City, in the suburbs, let alone the city. See, New York City, no, is our countries have to an extent a discernible need to keep ties to each other, to appreciate where and how we are bound by nature, and simultaneously where we are supposed to be depending, valuing how we are independent. And we are supposed to be valuing the function by species bodies, not as each other's bodies, grouped some way, made that way anyway. Like for example, how different species have male, female, species body, individual body of the species body. See, its system causes positive or negative value nature progressions in a hyper additional way, slash S, from the ways we know. But this employs self-value. Well, we know, see, I'm not talking about the known self-value reason, oh, because they do this because of money. That such truths were propagated to screen the breaching method, which knew that it would increasingly have to keep what nature is capable of demonstrating to consciousness and for how reason and logic works properly. It has two identities of relativity that can't be made up as itself. So the value of what came true before the smallest finite detail of America's republic keeps demonstrating to us the increasing value of understanding how that there was a breaching method already entrenched in having been sustained, sickly distinctly against our founders, and that including against the Native Americans, and sickly distinctly against them as our founders who had to counter-exploit the other founders, and sickly distinctly against them as the Native Americans who had to fight with each other and or cultivate unities that too would increasingly couldn't defend that, and the voicing for the native hyper-native system that will not be abridged. You could abridge, you could pretend you don't realize the Constitution is abridged. But nature will demonstrate negative value progressions, acts, and natures. See, but this breaching method effectively employed those negative value progressions, acts, and natures. Blamed on other things, others, ourselves. It knew that it could make fake sophistication. It could make identities of law and of legal nature, pretending passions and emotions, and in defending that, and pretending to perceive that, see things with that and others, because they're leaving out how the emotions serve a function, but they are about the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous. And so we know at locations, communications can be and were and are forced, not just by overt criminal enterprises and private ones, not just by the three branches of government and exceptions tied to that, not as semi-admin, not just to insidiousness of people A through Z, but their logic regarding the value of voting, for example. the voting locations as they were and are still involved with juxtaposed natures of distinct organized crime bodies, but uses of them also their differences from the difference of the interbranch relative to where and how they are used remotely with readings of statutes in backgrounds and up front, distinctly non-distinctly, and hyper simultaneously. So if honesty, so everyone, the nature of communications when they take oaths already since they were, before third grade, an honest person with correlation nature. Even if you're told, even though they tell American history wrong, they can discern that they were building everything with wagons. And to an extent, the South had roles with slavery. So they distinctly teach that wrong and right, but all wrong even when they're right, even when they're wrong, in northern schools. And this is also where and how it is signed, means by that. By having, for example, means by having natural difference / as explained to us by nature, hyper additional ways. While as the ways we know, but those are all fake when they're pretending other. How that is motivated and gotten away with, you have to understand. How they make little kids lie when they're little. When first they're honest, because they've been putting fake things in databases. Because they assigned effectively all identities of the law and all uses of convictions by the law, as everyone makes when you're speaking, whether you realize it or not. You're making premises uses. You're making sequence value uses. You're making identity, therefore names uses. You're making positive and negative treatments uses. But you have left out how there could be and is the difference between positive as a criminal insidiousness nature of a positive. For example, for all kinds of uses of all kinds of truths used for lies. And way worse, truths used for predicate acts. And way worse, truths used for predicate act methods. And way worse, truths used for predicate act natures. And way worse, because all that is kept needing to highlight progressions for all kinds of juxtaposed reasons, right back to all location / S, and at those, everywhere the species body stands. Also has collusions. We already had all identity grounds, voicing, formal, and other natures of criminal insidiousness with them. Criminally foreign influence readings of statutes, force, trick, hurt, and persuasion, self-value. Anyone tries to be sensitive, everyone's relying upon that. So people can't afford mandated law followed at locations. So they can't afford to have discerned how functional nature keeps uses by like a footnote. If someone's speaking about what they believe is the value of their emotions or other people's emotions, and they're not affording that quality of time treatments and stuff like that, and the value of what came first, and use of that to be allowed to be spoken about, that's a problem. And they're still doing that, and they've been doing that. They've been attaching people to fake words. Since founding, you guys have been blaming the real cause of negative value progressions, acts, and natures, where and how no law of integrity spoke for the color black or the color white. or for the word difference, let alone for the word war, let alone that word, revolution. They have these as keywords where they have remote uses of investigators, simply distinctly from, but tactically delusions wrought with the worst patients in criminal scores. So, tactically, criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality, aspect, nature, with that. Sequences, lies, illusions, delusions, and the uses of that at each age of fact, cheap nature. Need increasingly self-value at every location. Miscorrelation is nature shows us if we use this two additional identities of means to correlation. For example, the value of sequence truth before the word of the finite now. And grouped in all what is simultaneous, where how the president slash chief and chief slash president is how the ancients would interpret what that means. And they would discern that and how criminal enterprises as groupings of criminal insidiousness and it as a negative identity relation to itself, even if positive ones. For example, as these systems tactical ulterior from the one that is hyper-native and only increasing the value per watt. How only increasingly value is the discernment of how Native Americans, how they were forced to fight with each other, and how how they are forced to be unities with each other, leaving out the means to an admission of syntactically, correlatively, all kinds of ways. Additionally, that and how the hyper-native systems, the hyper-simultaneous. These are systems tactical ulterior from its system being aware and how it is also positive unto itself. So regardless, nature shows that nature revealed the Republic. It revealed how finite details could and should be defended. It revealed how functional it is, how the hyper invisible but still discernible comes with the function of, and as the function of the invisible but still discernible, such as these parts of speech that languages are about. Their identity as volume, as value, as nature, slash nature as value simultaneously. Nature as value, slash value as nature. It is the identity that is left to right, and is right to left distinctly while being itself, the hyper-invisible but still discernible. Not just because of the functions by this, not the order of communication, the order of consciousness. See, nature communicates answers and gives us means to correlation that the identities of opinion natures and conviction natures cannot afford to discern. Nature showed that and how the difference slash not the difference between each age of correlation nature has a function by its own, only increasingly valuable functional way of being distinctly hyper-invisible to an extent discernible, juxtaposed with the invisible but still discernible. So we don't just discern verbs as verbs. We also discern them as a participle nature. Why would we want to discern that? A verb also has a participle nature. Because not every verb is a main verb or a compound verb, where the different verbs equal the same main verb. The identity of volume of the verb has an identity of relationship to itself. It has the only increasing value of that. While two other identities of value/value progression that don't mix with that but one way, do anyway, are inseparable from all things and from all parts of all things, individually grouped and together. So it is the value of sequence truth. It is a value, there is an extent of the future that we know is to come. That's invisible but still discernible. There is an extent of that beyond that, as the hyper-simultaneous, as the hyper-invisible but still discernible. The breaching method knew that what would unfold as cities would have left out where and how the victims/hyper-victims as suburbs were already reliant upon value nature systems with means from other locations. There are proofs that they tactically denatured and took away evolution's fruits and gifts, food sources, identity of the ground's identity of relationship to itself, where and how it causes positive and negative value nature progressions, acts and agents, or negative ones. But then again, we have to understand how there is a difference between positive as criminal insidiousness. See this, while the breaching method, how could it divide Native Americans from Native Americans? It took away the means to cause positive value nature progressions while simultaneously nature was demonstrating the negative value nature progressions acts of nature. And demonstration of the breaching method rolls with it, regardless of force. And so these are things that we can discern are true always, which is distinct from what we need to use the God for. That's a variable, the God variable. Algebraic consciousness algebraic, and consciousness algebraic, and the consciousness algebraic/algebraic consciousness. They are valued distinctly as sequence/simultaneous nature. Because that's one of the things, the five. That's one of the things the order of the finite and every finite small detail is. That's one of the things. How group difference is, and why how group differences are manifest the way they are. We have different color eyes, while we have the same color eyes. We are a different species body from the other species. But even the other species have sexes. They have exception nature. And they have a special difference, which only science would have revealed. But we have arrays, such as the names in all sides of criminal and in civil cases, and with victims advocates, and with their campuses and names of the hallways of the courts, involved with federal evidence of crimes. And then again through time. Prepare your mind. These are people involved with the World Trade Center attack. Weathersfield Interbranch in other states recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. with his lawyer, Robert Chevrolet, with Thaddeus Grabowski, with people with the name Mendez, people tied to them, and the name Domain, on off Fox Connecticut News, on off Connecticut District Court, rules leading up to years before the World Trade Center attack, also with as Connecticut's roles intercities, criminally foreign influence uses of databases, other people's names, fake conversations with little kids, that the police were pretending to child defenders. They've had roles with foreign and domestic medical families, including from Russia, including from Afghanistan, including from Pakistan, including from Italy, including from Germany, mental health, military, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, pretending other roles with interbranch switching names, pretending passions and emotions, pretending legitimate calmness, pretending not to realize. Same time with the news doing this. They have been preventing writing and putting fake exceptions since everyone was young. Where and how they have assigned uses of the database, uses of the identity of values like value progression that humanity is. Already used by the experts on computers, for example, of every science. They can't defend that and afford to discern how properly the descriptions of how computers work and how they are with relativity and how to describe that. Here, I teach you law. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves, fake locations. They did that to enforce roles with the principal being whose recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, having been roles with various natures of digital, sexual, and medical, and interbranch families, and ones with campuses placements. There's the O'Neill family, and there are roles with governors, and with the appointment of a kid governor, and the name Mendez also involved, with them assigning kids to roles with sequence checks, and to roles with predicate acts with fax methods, with databases, and where they're pretending passions and emotions and haven't gotten away with that as psychopaths regarding their treatments of calm speech, where and how with convictions, and with their passionate ones. They have the differences of the networks as an array and collusion. So if you watch, if you guys have a shared channel that shows the different newses, stay on that one and then rewind and watch when they're speaking, when they're doing the topic. Because they're being coached to lie. No, when you hear music and they're speaking about things with murders and criminal enterprises and criminal insidiousness and wrongdoing and science, where and how in the heck did anyone get the right to pretend passions and emotions spoke for one science to the black people's course and white track? You guys are fake. They have the black family members, the kids and the adults from Wethersfield self-finding roles simply distinctly from the Confederate flag theme and KKK theme and black theme, military police. Roles with all kinds of foreign and domestic cultural fakes. Well, this is my opinion on it. Get down! If you guys got to fix American history, I'll do it for you. We have to fix our country's history. So we have to make positives out of negatives, not as criminal and sinister natures of positives, as it employed only capable of being fathomed. Do it by his preaching this, so we could have a military exercise that modern countries can share. And this way, it could be worth money because it's not in other words. and anything that costs money, things like that. In other words, we're going to we have a movie script because we blame a semi-ancient, hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. Because what is recorded anyway is that and how each modern country, A through Z, has stayed an archetypal criminal enterprise, slash S, has stayed archetypal criminal insidious in this nation. Here are these terms, yes. The identities of law have conquered criminal enterprises. That their delusions and their criminally foreign influence fact-checking nature, in fact, already in their fact-checking nature itself, was its collusions with the causes of the murders in New York City. If you can't see and discern that how the suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and nature, first of all, two, while the cities were unfolding, effectively that was used to measure and maintain what can be entertained, let alone relied on, and at the same time defending the logic, short words, let alone their protraction, as proper nature needed to, for defense of what Constitution unabridged and Marbury versus Madison needed. What I produced. So we have victims and victims advocates. To the same time, all sides in criminal and civil cases in the world. Not to get out, they like terms like phrases like ambulance chaser, and or like virtue signaling. Virtue signaling. You have to understand how the hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise is an extent of hyper-invisible but still discernible too. As a method, at least its method is, because it never went away. Even if it's not being backed by an actual hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, is maintained uses of identities of value progression, of conviction nature. For example, as systems defending the passions and emotions, tactical terrier from the one that uses passions and emotions to show when any person or everyone at once is lying about the smallest finite detail or the value of that. And, and this is where and how it is functional too. Where and how the hyper invisible is still discernible is. See, the time treatments at interbranch locations are incapable of affording the quality of fact sheet nature necessary, and are also increasingly hiding that. You could uses of it remotely already. Before there were murderers increasingly more concentrated in cities than in suburbs. And even when there were the difference between how they were rarely murders, those murders have roles in the ones with the cities, these locations. Overt criminal enterprises and private ones have adults and kids in their family members. Within the branch ones, and with a whole bunch of other countries, uses of identities, of positive and negative treatments. In other words, uses of words like ego, uses of words like um, descriptions, descriptions of all people, names, instances. They're leaving out exceptions and exception nature, needing to pretend other. So, a number of people who commented on my YouTube page I don't know, but they reported, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, have roles with the Joshua Julian, and with the name Colombo, and with Wethersfield Police, with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and various natures of former and domestic military and their families, and medical families, and people associated with it since they were kids. That they, attach the kids that aren't even in classes with them, fake locations, fake ties to themselves, fake nature ties to themselves, some make quick fake instances, remote uses of mayors and their kids, remote uses of senators and their family members, the same things with judges and prosecutors, their family members, same time with the overt criminal enterprise, private ones in military, same names. So, in other words, that's what's recorded. When did that go away? What has been speaking where others been told? They've been blaming our founders, or what's your research? The research our founders told us they had to hide their roles. They were sent. The laws were against that. Our founders had to counter the other founders. Then they had to, then they would have had to hide what they did then. Say that they rely on them then. Our real founders. And that's semi the Native Americans who still haven't recovered from being used remotely, individually grouped together, because that's still going on. Every natural difference is effectively assigned to measure and maintain uses of it for nothing that would have nothing to do with that and still doesn't. All the exception nature, self-evaluated by our own, pretending that's it and really perceiving that's what people are talking about. When we try to use that as evidence, fake sciences and criminal insidiousness nature and tactically delusions are all psychopathic takes on science and on things like emotions and confidence are the only voices allowed to be heard speaking for the people of the suburbs or the cities. Sickly distinctly too. Because simultaneously, increasingly, the people of the suburbs and the people of the cities, nature gives them, per the preaching method, it gives us a means to discern it easier from that. If we are our humanity born in that position, or finding ourselves in that position as urban, no matter what level of urban, these are value nature systems that have nothing to do with the one that is inseparable from all other ones. They have nothing to do with it but per where and how the exceptions are being used to deny all the uses worse, hyper evidential. We're trying to speak for the metaphysics, the hyper metaphysics slash X, slash metaphysics, delusions, and criminally formed most fact-cheating nature, quality aspects of nature, relevant to treatments of black and white uses, and how they say, how this got away with it so long. Why and how we have white Caucasian design on the thing, or which your ethnicity. And they have left out what our founders left us to understand that each age of fact, even age is simply distinctly. Others simply distinctly in its place, though. So I needed to a whole bunch of illusions to hide behind and other apparent motivations. A whole bunch of victims slash hyper victims never fathomed where and how the kids and the adults with self-value roles, with what no one wanted inclusion with, and increasingly doesn't. That already used the identities of sophistication slash non-sophistication and the difference of that as collusions with fact sheet myths relative to where and how the breaching method replaced the communications of our founders with that force pretended entertained by them and pretended only communicated for them. You know, they left out the reaching method recording. It uses difference and it uses some additional ways that math could too. See? So there are tactical delusions and our criminally foreign influences behind and uses of it behind where and how. They have logic defined as a math. Here! We're on time for this. Fixed interbranch Connecticut, the only three branches of government. It's a whole bunch of exceptions tied to them, like whiting forensics, through time with their patients and criminals before they got caught. Whole bunch of foreign and domestic medical and overt criminal enterprises and private ones, even with the campuses too, including the campuses training interstates connected criminal justice, each of the sciences, English, because again, I discern how the sciences share an identity in its conjunction to as the value of the predicate to English in the predicate act of the law. Here! So they're grouped all along. I'll see. I teach us good to go along. See my song too, please, people. Boxing song by Anthony Walker. Well, here you are, boxing. Shout box. Okay, thank you. Please make them get on paper, connected into branch. Every year of my life, increasingly, they have little predicate acts rules, predicate acts with facts. All exception H are a demonstration of the same thing. Boxing. I'm going to show you little trick facts they do to make them pretend that people had conversations they never did, and then some with little trick facts like that. Because that has to do with the witness protection program on all sides in criminal and civil cases. Don't forget that. And interbranch switching names and names of the hallways and names all along the roads and routes involved with, at the same time, federal evidences, crimes, illusions, and delusions are relative because they are tactical and used a number of ways that are also singularly used. Boxing.